get to this panel as quickly as we can because it is a phenomenal group of speakers that we've put together, and we're going to hear from one of our startups in the Ocean Startup Project as well. Just a couple of minutes on her company, and she's such an interesting founder. While we're having more people join, I'm just going to give a little rundown on the Ocean Startup Project and what we are and what we are doing. So the Ocean Startup Project is a pan-Atlantic collaboration between Creative Destruction Lab, Genesis out of Newfoundland, and Novacor out of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick Innovation Foundation, PEI Bioline, Springboard Atlantic, and then we've partnered up with Canada's Ocean Supercluster and COA. And our vision, folks, is to make Canada the best place in the world to launch and grow an ocean company. And we think that the momentum is starting to galvanize around that vision. So this slide is really why we are so bullish on Canada's strength and opportunity in the ocean sector. Here's just a small sample of the ocean innovators in Canada. There's a lot of momentum in this country right now with the Ocean Supercluster's $300 million investment. We have ocean assets like Cove and Holyrood, Coast and Victoria, PEI Bio Alliance, and we have some of the best incubators and accelerators in the world. So we're looking to add to these logos, and I'll show you some of the companies that we have in our ocean cohort on the next slide here. So this is a slide demonstrating where our relatively new ocean startup project companies have hailed from in Canada. So with the $1.4 million this year that we expect to invest in new companies, we expect to fill this map out substantially with new companies, both domestically and then add some international companies like Virgil Group, who you're going to hear from. One company on this slide I want to highlight is Blue Lion, and it's out of Ontario. And I'm highlighting them because it's a really impressive data and software company that supercharges strategic hardware providers with proprietary AI tools and analytics to deliver real-time monitoring of harmful organisms in water. So it's relevant to what we're talking about here today. So folks, this year, we have a lot of money that we're rolling out, and we're doing a lot of different things with the Ocean Startup Challenge. So we're going to award that $1.4 million to early stage entrepreneurs. And we've put this into 3 different streams. And we have the idea stream for very, very early stage ventures and ideas. We have the growth stage, which is still, I want to be clear, early stage, TRL 4 to 7. And then we're looking for that great big idea, the one that could solve major problems with the ocean. And if it was able to do that, it would just be an incredible feat. So we want to fund something like that as well. So applications for our next Ocean Startup Challenge are opening March 30th of this year. So get your ideas ready. Then, folks, we also coming down the pipeline in 2021, we have our second lab to market oceans cohort. So it's a 7-week program to help researchers and PhD students take that idea from the lab to the market. And we have mentorship involved in that. And the applications for that open March 31st of this year. And last year's cohort was a really big success, and a lot of marketable skills were learned, and we have companies coming out of that as well. We also, folks, have our second cohort on CDL Oceans. This is a program where you can get exposure to some of the most successful and knowledgeable entrepreneurs in the world to help you accelerate the growth of your company. We had our first CDL Oceans cohort start in 2021, and it's ongoing. We're going to do our second cohort, and it's just an incredibly impressive operation. So folks, we want to stay connected with you. So we have our next Ocean Solutions Exchange, February 23rd at 1. We're going to be talking about naval and defense. We're going to have another fantastic panel like we have today. And we'll share more important details about the Ocean Startup Challenge at that time. So follow us on any of those platforms you see written there. So Celeste, are you there? I want to introduce you. So Celeste is the CEO of Virgil Group, which started relatively recently and is part of our inaugural Ocean Startup cohort. So I'm going to turn it over to Celeste to tell you a little bit about what Virgil Group does and some of the accomplishments they've had to date. Celeste, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Don. Yeah, I'm Celeste LaRue. I'm the founder and CEO of Virgil Group. You'll hear about a lot of challenges that we're currently facing to feed a hungry world during this panel and in the networking session that's going to follow. But my startup's goal, our way to contribute to this, is to end illegal seafood trade. About a decade of management in the US federal policy space on oceans. After that, I really couldn't shake the feeling that something was a little bit wrong. Everyone wants to stop illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and we tried our best to keep illegal seafood out of the United States by having importers share every detail about that fish's journey from the sea to our border. And I ended up with a constant fire hose of data blasting its way through customs and onto my desktop with no way to analyze it. And the truth is, we were demanding legal seafood, but usually settling for traceable seafood. And bridging that gap requires checking trade data against a global constellation of regulations, environmental factors, and law enforcement efforts. So I left government with the idea for a software solution to this problem that would give industry a fighting chance to detect any risky product in their supply chains before attempting to import it or even before purchasing it from their suppliers. It turns out that we were just in time because last summer, the Ocean Startup Challenge first sort of chummed the water with their first competition, and we made our way on over. I could not have expected that decision to change my life as much as it has. They have believed in our vision from the very start and our capacity to realize it. And they took a chance by handing us some non-dilutive funding, like Don was just describing, when we were only a few months old. They invested in us before anybody else, and they didn't just cut us a check and walk away. They continued to provide coaching and mentoring and the chance to develop stronger roots in Atlantic Canada. So thanks to that early support, we were able to go from an idea to an operating pilot in under a year, and I'm really excited to see what happens next. So I look forward to continuing our growth with the Ocean Startup Project as they prepare to sort of bait these waters for innovation again. I think it's going to be really exciting to see who comes this year. If you guys have an idea to make the world a little bit better, or if in the course of listening to this panel, you're inspired to do something new, I just want to say from my perspective, you should consider testing these waters in Atlantic Canada. I'm really glad that I did. So thanks for your time and enjoy the rest of the panel.
Thanks so much, Celeste. I was going to say we didn't pay Celeste to say that, but apparently we probably did in some way. So we did not set that up, but thank you so much, Celeste. Celeste is just an incredibly impressive founder and somebody you got to keep an eye on because she is going to take Virgil Group places. Folks, just today we have brought together some industry experts to discuss challenges, trends, and opportunities for innovation in the fisheries and aquaculture sectors. So what you're going to hear today is that there's a ton of potential and possibility for growth in the ocean sector, and that you, all of you on this call who are thinking about getting into entrepreneurship are as well positioned as anyone to take advantage of it. So now, in my opinion, is the time to start an ocean tech company in Canada. My hope is that you walk away today and have listened to these incredible speakers and consider where your ideas, passion, and expertise fit with all of the opportunities presented by them. What I know for sure, folks, is that there's funding and resources available for you here in Canada, and we at the Ocean Startup Project are here to help. So really, really think about it. Now is such a great time to get into the ocean sector. Folks, at the end of this, we're going to have a networking portion of the event, and you'll have the opportunity to connect with some of these panelists directly. So after the discussion, we'll open some breakout rooms and we'll give you more instructions at that time. And now I'm just going to introduce Emily Petrolia, who is our moderator today. Emily, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you to all of our panelists. you have taken on a lot of responsibility with this incredible panel of speakers. And so thank you. Do you want to just give us a little introduction to who you are before you introduce or you get your panelists to introduce themselves?
Sure. Thank you so much, Don. And it's a responsibility I'm very humbled to take part in. It is a fantastic panel, and I'm so happy to support your efforts. I think this is a wonderful mission that aligns with a lot of what I do. So I'm Emily Petrolia. I'm the founder of ESP Advisors. We're a boutique government relations and public affairs firm based in Washington, D.C. and the West Coast of the United States. And we have a team of subject matter experts in oceans, environment, and science issues. I'm a recovering ocean scientist myself. And after I left academia, I worked in the US Senate, drafting aquaculture and fisheries policy, among other priorities. And then I joined the late Paul Allen's Vulcan Inc., working on maritime domain awareness and wildlife trafficking technology. So Celeste, that was so interesting to hear about, and I would love to follow up with you. IUU is definitely something I haven't been working on as much lately, but love and technology is going to be the key. And so then I sort of went to a really traditional K Street government relations lobbying firm where I was director of government relations for sustainability for Fortune 500 and Fortune 50 corporations. And so all of that, just to give a little background of the many different areas that I think all hone in on this discussion. You know, we're talking about technology, sustainability, fisheries and seafood, and how the market can really help, you know, grow all of us. Not to make a pun, but the rising tide lifts all boats analogy. So we do have an absolutely outstanding panel I'm so thrilled to be speaking with today. And they're here to share their insight on big problems, trends, technology, and innovation in the fisheries and aquaculture industry from a truly global perspective. So just another thank you to Eric, Don, Katie, Natasha, and all the folks at Ocean Startup Project for making this conversation possible and bring us all together. I recognize we don't have a lot of time and you guys don't want to hear from me. I want to make sure we have as much time for the panelists and all of your great questions. So I'm going to try to limit our introductions and just get to business. So I'll introduce each panelist in order of appearance from the event page, and I'm going to challenge them to spend 2 minutes or less introducing themselves, providing a very brief description of their organization, and then sharing one technology or data challenge in the seafood industry that they'd like to see solved in the next 5 years. So hopefully this will kind of get everyone's creative juices flowing. I know especially many of us are looking from the technology sector. What can we build? What do we need? So that's where we're going to start with. So let's start with Jason Cleaversmith. I understand that he is also a recovering scientist, and he's Vice President of Health and Nutrition and General Manager for Canada at the Center for Aquaculture Technologies, coming to us from Prince Edward Island in Canada. Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Just to follow up on what Emily was saying there, essentially the Centre for Aquaculture Technologies is a full-service CRO which supports those in the aquaculture sector that have an innovative technology they want to test out to see whether it has the impact kind of expected. We work with large, small organizations, and more often than not, they're at the cutting edge of innovation. So that makes the work we do really, really interesting. To address your comment about tech challenges, I think there's clearly still a place for experts in individual disciplines, but what I'm seeing in the aquaculture space is those crossovers of technologies. So where you're looking at where biology, technology, artificial intelligence, data management kind of overlap, where they can give you better insights or provide solutions to key production challenges or business challenges that you have, then that's where a lot of opportunity appears to be growing. And I guess as I'm the first of the panelists, I can take the obvious one that's on the table, and Boggy will hate me for this, but you know, sea lice is clearly the biggest challenge facing the traditional salmonid aquaculture sector, costing somewhere around $1 billion USD a year. It has reputational risk, it has equipment risk, it affects human capital and usage, fish welfare. and also reporting costs associated with that. So anything we can do to address that particular challenge, I think in the next 5 years would be very much welcome from the industry.
That is incredibly helpful, Jason. Thank you. Next up, we have Dick Jones. He's the CEO of Blue Ocean Mariculture, speaking to us from Hawaii, USA.
Thank you, Emily. Happy to be here. So we raise Hawaiian kampachi off the coast of Kona, Hawaii. We are aquaculturists. We have cages offshore here and lease to grow up to 2,400 metric tons of fish. As of last week, we are the first Aquaculture Stewardship Council certified finfish farm in the US, and currently the only ASC certified farm of any species in the United States. So we're very proud of the accomplishment. Not, a lot of organizations look at certification as a door to open new markets, where we think about it as a way to ensure that our farm is working at the highest level and that we are meeting those standards and ensuring that our performance is top notch. So we're very proud of our team and our new certification. We've always worked here without a lot of technology. From a software perspective, you can certainly think about our cages as cutting edge technology, but we've always done our data collection through Excel spreadsheets and transposing dive logs and the such. And so we've been looking quite extensively at different software solutions to be able to help us analyze our data and be able to make better real-time decisions. So looking forward to, over the next 5 years, an increase in platforms for software collection and analytics that are non-salmonid specific. We everything that we do, we take the salmon model and then try to fit it with our cereal species. And I think it's important for folks to understand that there are new emerging species out there, and that there are specific needs that each of us has to be able to make our farming the most efficient as possible.
Thanks, Dick. That's really helpful. And I think something that's going to be so critical for scaling as aquaculture production has increased around the world. So next up, we have Bjørgafur Havertsen, the Innovation Manager at the Seafood Innovation Cluster, and he's coming to us from Norway.
Thank you, Emily, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody out there. Like Emily said, I'm the Innovation Manager of a seafood cluster out of Bergen on the west coast of Norway. We are a joint venture government-private within a program called NCE, or Norwegian Centers of Expertise. So each industry establishes their own cooperative centers, and they get a wee bit funding from the government and quite a bit more from the private members of the cluster. Let's say we are simple people. We don't work with anything that doesn't include a major increase or improvement in sustainability. Every sort of incremental improvement is what I consider in-house with our members. But where we can contribute to increased sustainability, improved fish health, fish welfare, that would be where we come in. Like I said, we have about 90 members, huge and large fish farmers. Our biggest member company is Cargill, probably about 120,000 employees. Our smallest one is actually one person, so there's a bit of a scale here. We have companies who are some of the biggest seafood companies in Europe. We have small pa and ma companies, or third generation fish farmers. So the diversion, or the span here is incredible. We have 5 universities with us. We have 2 major research centers, internationally renowned, both of them. as well as I think we're up around 40 startup companies of all sorts of shades and shades of where they are in the run from great idea to entering the market. And obviously those who are entering the market are doing so in the worst of times, literally. And we will see that impact. I don't think I'll tell anything else about our little company. We are 8 employees and growing really quickly. We doubled our turnover year on year, 19 to 20. So we are very proud of that. Problems, well, Jason covered it all. So, but there's nothing wrong to agree. Sea lice, the sea lice problem is in salmon farming is without any discussion the biggest issue we are facing. And it goes on fish health, fish welfare, it goes on our bottom line, it goes on what I like to call our sort of joint venture with our communities. We are actually operating in our fjords in close proximity with the wild stocks of salmonids. So we have a lot of work to do there. Another issue that we see, and we are actually working on quite actively, that's digitalization of the industry. Or I don't like the word digitalization, I would like to use transformation, using our own data to improve what they're doing and putting our data out there to create innovation. And we have a great project on that called Aquaculture, and we are pushing out the first data sets that are now, well, early next month, I think, we will have the first data sets out. And our goal is to put more or less live industry data out there to innovators to work on, to research partners to work on, and to play back their improvements and ideas to us to improve our own management. So I think I'll let that rest, and then we can probably pick up the thread as we go along.
Thanks, Björgulfur. That's great. And I think the data aspect is really, really key, and hopefully we can dig into that as well. So next up, I'd like to introduce Gabrielle Gomez. He's the general manager at Marine Instruments in Spain. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
Well, like you said, I'm the general manager of Marine Instruments. We're based in Vigo, in the northwest coast of Spain, which is probably, I think it's one of the biggest fishing harbors in the world. And our company, we design and we manufacture marine electronics, particularly for our origin of the company is in commercial fisheries. We're one of the main producers of satellite buoys for tuna fisheries, for fish, for tracking fish aggregating devices in the ocean. Yeah. And also we are one of the key players in electronic monitoring, which actually we are partnering with a company based in Canada, in Victoria, in British Columbia, which is Archipelago Marine Research. And they were the pioneers in electronic monitoring more than 20 years ago. And we are 150 people in Marine Instruments. Around 40% of those, around 60, are R&D engineers, electronic engineers, software engineers working in the next developments and ideas that we have. And also we manufacture most of the products that we design, yeah, because we believe that in order to deliver robust electronics for harsh marine environments, yeah, we need to have a tight control of the whole manufacturing process, yeah, which is key for delivering good products, yeah. And we started, as I said, in commercial fisheries. A couple of years ago, we started investing also in aquaculture. We just opened a small office in Guayaquil in Ecuador, and we are trying with our acoustic technology to go into shrimp farming. That's why I have a picture of a shrimp farm in the Guayaquil area behind me. And also recently we started trying to enter the defense and the security and defense area, yeah, with some of our autonomous vehicles. So what are the challenges in our opinion? We are trying to, or we've been trying to evolve from, let's say, from an electronics and a hardware oriented company into more data and data services. So we have been investing heavily in AI and big data and all those things. And one of the key challenges that we see for the next years is the ownership of that data and how to convince our customers and partners of the power that these aggregated data and data models can offer them. Yeah, we're talking about fishermen, or we're talking about fish farms who are very protective on their data, and where when we're trying to deliver value by using aggregated data from different farms or from different fishermen, yeah, we're still encountering lots of problems with that. So for me, one of the biggest challenges would be as a technology provider, yeah, how to overcome those feelings about the ownership of data and the value of that data.
That's a great point, and kind of also more of a social policy issue too, related to technology, which of course we all know none of these things live in a vacuum.
Exactly.
So thank you. But last but certainly not least, we have Roxanne Naninga. She's Director of Sustainability, Diversity, and Inclusion for Thai Union North America, coming to us from California, US.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be on this panel and to meet all of you. I actually have a background in founding a startup myself, also sort of dealing with the issues of legal seafood trade. So Celeste, you and I should connect sometime. I had a service for DNA testing and seafood trade, so it'd be fun to hear about your experiences. I've been with Thai Union for about 4 years now, and in case you're not familiar, Thai Union is the world's largest manufacturer of canned tuna. The company is based out of Bangkok, Thailand, but our company is a global corporation, so we have brands throughout Europe and in the US and in Asia. So I work with our Chicken of the Sea brands in the US, and that encompasses some of the largest commodities, including canned tuna, salmon, wild caught salmon, that is. And then for the farmed species, we are the largest importer of farmed shrimp into the US, coming primarily from Asia. So my purview as Director of Sustainability for North America is to sort of enact our sustainability agenda across all of these commodities. I work as part of our global team, and it's a really interesting world to be in, dealing with diverse challenges. Gabrielle, definitely interested in the issues around FAD management and data FAD management for those tracking devices. This is something we touch on often, and then particularly challenges in shrimp aquaculture. I think the main issue I'd like to see solved in the next 5 years, and one that I work on a lot, is traceability. And Celeste touched on some of the many challenges around traceability, but I think at the very least, the data exchange component, we should be able to nail down in the next 5 years. I think we've made a lot of progress in the past 5 years. I'm part of the steering committee for a group called the Global Dialogue on Seafood Traceability, that you may have heard of, and together we've formed some key data elements and interoperability tools that I think should be able to become really enacted in the next 5 years. So I look forward to that, and I look forward to talking with you all on this panel. Thanks.
Thanks, Roxanne. That was excellent. I'm excited to dive in. It's a whole slew of really interesting issues. And thanks everyone for those lightning introductions. It really got creative juices flowing. So I have some specific questions prepared for each of you, and just want to remind the audience, please ask any questions you have in the chat, and I'll do my best to incorporate it as we go along. And I'll ask questions as well as I can to specific panelists, but if you were not asked it and you would like to add something, please just raise your hand in real life or in the Zoom technology function. And if I miss you, just interrupt me. So going back in the same order, my first question is for Jason. So from your vantage point and in the work you do, Jason, how important is innovation, technology, and data management for aquaculture producers? And what are the trends that you're seeing globally, just from the work you do?
Yeah, thank you, Emily. I think it's foundational to the sector. I think innovation is really at the heart of the aquaculture sector, and often those out there, the producers and the supply chain, are often pushing the limits, boundaries of, and often inventing the sector as they go along. So they're creating the operating norms and responding to challenges that they have. If we, I won't solely focus on the salmoniid sector, because there are many other species out there, as Dick highlighted earlier on, but it's only 60 years old, so it's a very, very young business that's ripe for innovation. It typically is very cost conscious. So there's no point coming into the sector with a kind of an oil sector kind of background. As we bring in technology and the price points for that technology start to come down, then my experience in the sector is that it's very agile, it's very fast changing, and then they're very open to innovation and to changing the way they operate to try and get some advantage. I think from any technology that kind of accelerates kind of learning or overcomes key production challenges or gives a better understanding of the operating dynamic or the environment in which they work is often very welcome, and we're seeing more and more of an interplay of those kind of factors. But when we look at aquaculture across the globe, there is, you know, a fairly well-established premium kind of salmonid based industry, and then there are equally premium products coming through, but in niche species where we're still understanding the life cycle. We're trying to understand what key nutritional needs are. We're trying to understand what kind of diseases are affecting them, and so bringing together technology that allows the myriad of factors to come together in a way that a operator can interpret those data streams and make decisions based upon those that kind of data is really, really important. So I would encourage folks who are thinking about creating technology for the sector to think very carefully about the end user and how we bring in those different streams of information so they're harmonized and that there is something that is usable for a fish farmer at the end of the day. I guess with regards to trends, I think there's probably several macro trends that are impacting the sector at the moment. There is a consistent push on sustainability. I think the report card for aquaculture is very strong in that domain, from you know, amount of yield, fillet yield that from a given fish to environmental footprints, etc. It's pretty good, but there's always a push to try and improve that and continue to differentiate the sector by way of where it sources its raw materials, its proteins, etc., etc. I think there's a significant push towards proactive health management, so understanding the system. We typically work in an open environment. So can you get precursors, indicators of disease, and can you treat proactively so you maintain good fish health and welfare? There's a general move to bigger and bolder and better, I suppose, with regards to the farm size, and you know, perhaps in Norway they're approaching an optimal size there. Maybe a slight move from nearshore to slightly deeper waters, a more exposed kind of environments, and also there's a fairly significant push over the last couple of years into land-based kind of investments and technologies as well. So and finally, I would say, kind of from an environmental perspective, you know, it's in every producer's best interest to be good custodians of the environment in which they operate. Good water quality is really, you know, essential for business, and so kind of waste management technologies and ways of dealing with that enhance the water quality, you know, are really important too.
Thank you, Jason. That was really helpful. I love what you said, that, you know, kind of inventing the sector as we go, as we learn more, and it's great to hear. We're seeing that all over, that it's moving inland and offshore at the same time, which is completely different technology solutions. And also, you know, great to hear that this you kind of perceive this field as being pretty open to innovation within the limitations. So kind of following up on that, this next question's for Dick, sort of this concept that Jason raised about inventing the sector as we go. What challenges do you face in the day-to-day operation of blue ocean mariculture? And in a perfect world, what would you implement today, and what's holding you back from being able to do that?
Sure. You know, I think the biggest thing is we're not just a farm. We're a vertically integrated business, and so we go from broodstock through to raising fingerlings, put them offshore, raise them. We then have to harvest, sell, get them off of an island and to our customers. And all of those parts of our business depend on real-time data that we can use to make good decisions to move our fish the most efficient and effective way possible. I'm having a challenge right now trying to integrate those data points to be able to essentially follow the fish through our organization. There are lots of different data platforms that collect information, let's say offshore, but to integrate those into the earlier and later stages of our business is a gap in what we do today, and we basically have to build that ourselves. Looking specifically at the farm, we have crisp, clean, beautiful waters off of Hawaii. We love them and our predators love them. So we have a lot of sharks and other animals that are out at our farm. And so trying to keep our divers safe and keep our fish safe is a challenge that we're seeing today. I'm spending a considerable amount of time looking at different data platforms, and there's not a simple way for us to understand what's out there and available. I know what I need today, but to find what I need is certainly a challenge that I think we can address through better resource management and having the platforms available to simply look up what you are trying to solve and having those solutions close by. There isn't any part of our entire business that isn't somehow connected to hardware and software innovation, and at every touch point we could use some type of increased visibility into what we do, whether it is fish health, whether it's sales and marketing. It all needs that actionable data available.
Wow, that's fantastic to hear about. I was just thinking that, I was trying to buy the perfect, smartwatch, and there's all these listicles online that compare. We need that for these type of software systems. That's so interesting. And I think maybe leads into my next question for Biographer. In your work, how do you represent the return on investment in technology to aquaculture businesses? And does the technology speak for itself? Do you have to represent it? Do governments or other groups need to invest in incubation, policy, and education to help meet this market?
The simple answer here would be yes. There are sort of shades of everything here. Usually, obviously, and that's stating the obvious. There's also always a underlying value proposition here that the entrepreneurs want to bring to the industry, solving an issue. And then you have to, as a fish farmer, you have to actually ask, is this innovation addressing something that I'm only bothered by, or which is a major problem? And fish farmers, like everybody else, they want to take the big problems down before they take all the myriad of possibilities and smaller issues along the way. There are different ways to that goal. We get a lot of small companies, very early stage entrepreneurs bounced back to us from the fish farmers. The fish farmers say, well, this may be a good solution or good idea or good concept, but you're far from being mature, either as a product or as a, say, financially. Value of death is something that you actually have to face as a startup. It's that reach between marketable idea and actually being able to supply the market. Your success may kill you. So it's easy as that. And we are very sensitive on that. We have a multitude of programs, both in the cluster and in Norway, that we use. Some are our own, and some are in very good competition. In cooperation with Hatch Blue and Catapult Ocean, two very agile, high quality ocean catapults, helping these small companies to grow and even get some funding if possible. But what we do is exposing them to farmers, taking them back into the fold, massaging them, if you like, cutting off some of, I mean, everybody who has either been an entrepreneur or knows an entrepreneur know that they have 58 ideas and they have no idea which to go with today. It's Wednesday, I'm going to go with number 12. On Friday, it's going to be number 8. And one of the things we do is to cut it down to maybe not their favorite idea, but the idea we feel is most aligned with the needs of the industry. When they are billionaires, they can start exploring their all the 57 other ideas, which have probably then multiplied into 200. But that's the importance to help the companies, the startups, to actually show their value in an obvious manner. And like I said, there are different tools for that. And the solution is not always monetizing them, because if you throw good money at a bad idea, it's going to go to waste anyway. So it's that, and that is the strength of our cluster, and a lot of the clusters in Norway, as I know them. We have this really, really, really close relationship to our members. I meet a lot of fish farmers. Well, I probably talk to one fish farmer a week. And not always within the cluster. I talk to them in Scotland, I talk to them in Iceland, and obviously all over Norway. And this gives us that idea of what is really, really important to work on and what's fun to work on. And we try to do all the important stuff, but we pull also some of the fun stuff as well, because we all need motivation and visions. And I think there was one point said, I think Jason, you said it, about the development of innovators and startup companies and ideas. And I see that also in my work, and it makes my job a little bit more difficult, actually. We see, if we look at the development of fish farming, I'm going all metaphorical on you now, guys, so you have to hang on to your hats. If you look at the development of aquaculture industry, it's like a wave moving across the ocean. It's not cresting, it's just moving really, really quickly. When I started in fish farming, like say 30 years, 35 years ago, all the innovation was reacting to problems. They were in full Pathfinder mode. Things were burning and they were inventing the fire truck, the hose and the ladders as they went along. And so all these solutions were incredibly valuable for the fish farmers. So the fish farmers they had this infatuation with innovation. And they really, because they were enabling them all the way, going from 60-meter cages to 90 meters and all these scaling up and so problem solving. And then somewhere in the 10 years ago, the innovation, the speed of innovation moved on the top of the crest. So they were starting to look ahead a little bit. And that is a way more difficult proposition, to tell a fish farmer or company in any business that you are doing this now, but you should be doing this in a undefined sort of time space. And now they are moving ahead of the wave, actually exploratory, in an exploratory fashion, looking into what's possible. This could be cool. You have all this data now, you have all this sensorics in the sea now, you should be doing this. And the fish farmers are going, are you certain? Should I? And they sort of start starting to think, this is all really cool, but what kind of empowerment does this innovation give us? And I find that there's a lot of happening in the area of environmental metrics or environmental measurements, surveillance, both from satellites and down under, deep in the ocean. And the fish farmers ask, this is really cool, I love it. It gives me so many ideas and ways to understand why I'm failing. You have to supply a notion of a solution. So if you as a supplier come with a great idea, tell me what I'm also sort of solving ahead of that idea, not necessarily by just installing this black box. Tell me how it will improve in my management and my understanding of what I'm doing and how it will play back to my own organization. I hope I'm making sense here. But
no, yeah, I was just gonna, that's incredibly helpful. And I think sort of it's so great to hear how you have figured out how to maximize the passion and excitement of entrepreneurs and also kind of connect it back to the real world examples. And I wanted to pull in a question from the audience, and maybe this is best for Dick before we move on to the other questions. But it was just a really great practical question about how the cost of mooring installation, integrity repair for aquaculture operations. And if anyone wants to add to that.
I was just typing back to Alistair on that question. I mean, ensuring the integrity of our grid and our cages is certainly an expense, and something that our team spends a lot of time on. As I've said, we do have predators, and those predators do try to get into our cages. We're lucky in some ways, not so lucky in others, in that we have a relatively high current here in Hawaii, so we don't have as many issues with fouling on our cages, but the entire cost and process of cage maintenance is certainly a challenge for us.
Thank you, Dick. That's really helpful. So I'm seeing a lot of great questions in the chat too about community environmental impact, social license to operate, these kinds of questions. And I think that's something we could probably all speak to on the panel. And I think just because I had Gabrielle next in line for answering questions, I want to give it to Gabrielle first if he has anything to answer. And then if you want to speak to that, just indicate to me. Maybe Jason, do you want to take it off then?
Yeah, I think the social license question is a really, really important one, and in reference to Scotland, Norway, or Canada. We have an interesting situation in Canada where on the west coast there's a federal government and a great, I guess, a much bigger divide on the benefits of aquaculture and as to whether it should be present off the west coast of Canada. You contrast that with the east coast and where it's welcomed as a savior of communities and an employment creator and maintain that social fabric. And so even within one country, there's quite different perspectives on that. I would say certainly from my experiences in the UK and here, that the aquaculture sector is a significant investor in these more remote communities, and it does create jobs and employment. But you have to have the full breadth of community from a local perspective, right the way through to regional government and national government on board. And there is more and more regulation and oversight coming into the sector. And that is welcome to some extent. The industry has professionalized significantly over the last few decades at least, and you have to take the community with you. You have to have that social license. There's a really, really good story to tell with aquaculture about how that protein product can help feed the world's population and do that in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way, especially when you compare it to other modes of protein production.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I think unless anyone has anything to add, I think if I could add on this question a little bit, I think it also comes down to technology and those community, those like soft relationships, right? And then also policy. And I think that's a really key piece. I know this topic isn't about policy. We're talking about technology, innovation, and data, but they're all kind of interwoven. And that leads me to a question I had, because the market can bring these amazing efficiencies and innovation, but sometimes policy needs to get us over a hurdle. Sometimes bad policy hampers growth. So I would love to ask, I think Gabrielle, especially in the work you're doing, I think many of us know FADs are an international policy, decision that a lot of folks work on, and also in aquaculture. So how does policy impact your ability to take advantage of or implement this technology in your work with the fishing community? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, that's a classic. nowadays. That's a difficult question you're putting forward, yeah. But policy, particularly in commercial fisheries, has a very important impact on us as technology providers, because unfortunately we feel as technology providers that very often, because of, let's say, the difficulties of international policy and international treaties, it's easier to limit or to use the technology as a proxy of fishing effort and to limit the usage of technology, yeah? Particularly when we're talking of fats, very often instead of limiting catch, yeah, we're limiting the usage of fats. We think we are part of the problem, but we are also an important part of the solution most of the time, yeah? So by increasing the, let's say, or by increasing the innovation pace in our technology, we think that, for instance, we can improve, let's say, the selectivity of the fishing gear. We can improve the selectivity of let's say, of the marine acoustics, so that we can detect better, let's say, juvenile fish from older fish or bycatch or things like that, yeah? So we are in a very complex, let's say, international environment, yeah, where there are different economic interests, yeah, in fighting with each other. And unfortunately, very often we feel that technology providers, yeah, that we are part of this playing field and that we're being seen as the problem and not as part of the solution.
Thank you. That's a fantastic answer. And sort of bringing in that international and sustainability aspect leads me into a follow-up question for Roxanne, kind of similar, if you want to talk about how policy and technology work together or kind of fight with each other to achieve sustainability, but also sort of more specifically, how has Thai Union been using technology and data to increase sustainability all the way from the fishing vessels to the dinner plate? And in a perfect world, what kind of additional technology or innovative solutions would you incorporate, and what's holding you back? Is it policy? Is it costs? That kind of thing.
Okay, it's a big question and one I could answer in a lot of different ways, but you know, we definitely use innovation and technology in a lot of different ways through our operations. Thai Union, I should say, does not own vessels, so we occupy more of that middle supply chain role, but we obviously need a lot of connectivity back to the vessels themselves and the farms, et cetera, right? So that's why the traceability component is so important. But one of the angles that we haven't really talked about yet that I think would be interesting to bring up today is the kind of human rights angle. So some of the things that we have been working on from a kind of labor and human rights angle from technology, and I'll kind of illustrate by example for a couple of things here, but are looking at how we can provide connectivity for the workers on the boats themselves. So we had a pilot with a satellite internet provider a few years ago, in which we put the satellite internet on the fishing boat itself, and then that had sort of two goals. The first was to have an app that would monitor catch and bycatch, and you could kind of upload that information in real time via the internet. And that was good, but kind of bigger success of this pilot was this app that was just for messaging. So we allowed the crew members to have this messaging app on their phones that they could use to actually, you know, message back to their friends and family on shore. And this really turned out to be the most important part of that pilot, because so often workers at sea don't have any voice. They don't have any real accountability back to shore. That's the type of scenario that makes trafficking very easy. And so, you know, that it was just a pilot, and I hope that this type of technology will continue to expand and grow. I mean, it's from a limiting factor, we implemented on all the vessels we could, because it's still cost prohibitive. I mean, it's not easy to put these satellite internet devices on the boats and make it accessible for everyone. But I think I don't remember if it was Gabrielle who mentioned electronic monitoring systems. And this is something that I think we can start integrating more into these types of systems. So we're trying to improve visibility at sea through cameras on boats, and and then pairing that with satellite imagery where you can track where those boats are when there are transshipment events where you may not have great visibility around the people that are coming and going or not off of these boats. So I think all of that is to say that I think, improving the technology so that the costs can come down is a really big limiting factor, and one that I feel hopeful is going to happen. Like I hope that trajectory just continues to grow, and that we can have more and more visibility onto these boats for the sake of both the environment and the human rights. And then kind of similar to the human rights story, but moving from sea to shore, one of the things that we've been looking to do, and this is still very new experimental things, but we're working with someone who we're trying to pilot a way to have sort of a documented, verified, slavery-free supply chain in which you can have verification for every member of that supply chain's payment. So going back to even the vessels who catch, say, the fish that go into the feed, and then the farm workers to the factory workers, et cetera, making sure that there is documented transfer of funds to those workers all along the way. And then you can have that kind of transparency, not just for the sake of where does the product come from, but who are all the people that went into making that product and making sure that they are documented and accounted for. All of that obviously has to be backed up by policy. And we as a private company bump up against this all the time, where we're trying to innovate in this sector, but where we hit costs or where barriers of like, we don't want to be too far out ahead if all of our competitors are kind of still dragging at that bottom, that lower tail behind, because you can create for yourself if there's not the protection of good policy. So I think we're always trying to find that balance and dealing with how do we get international government to cooperate around fisheries policy, right? Like not only how do we set catch limits, how do we enforce labor conditions, all of that kind of thing is really a complex network of international government policy.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And thanks for finding a great way to answer my very complex and unwieldy question. So following up, I wanted to talk about, I think, oftentimes the elephant in every room these days is environmental change and climate change. It's obviously very quickly changing the operating space we live in, and with aquaculture and fisheries, we're always trying to adapt, and now we have this other sort of behemoth to be dealing with. So how is climate change and environmental change impacting the business, and can technology help to mitigate those impacts, or at least kind of take the pressure off? And anyone, just raise your hand if you want to take a stab at that one. Geographer. And then Roxanne.
Regretfully, we are part of this global change, and we see that extremely clearly along our coast, both in form of invasive species who should not thrive in our waters, but they do. We see the mackerel, usually and I'm not talking farming now, I'm talking about general fisheries and where the stocks are going. They're always a good indicator of what's happening when they come or leave. So we see the mackerel that has been a sort of Scottish, Faroese, Norwegian species has now crossed all over to Greenland. I come from a long line of fishermen on the east coast of Iceland, and my father said he had never seen more than 10 to 20 mackerels when he was fishing for herring around Iceland. Now the fjords, you can literally walk across the fjords of Iceland on mackerel, and the traditional species, they're gone. The autumn herring, it's gone. The the what they called the capelin, a very Arctic species, is starting to sort of disintegrate in terms of being a multi-million ton stock into being maybe 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 tons. Used to come into Iceland and Norway in ridiculous volumes. And now it's sort of just kissing the coast in small volumes. So there's something is happening. Further, if we bring it closer to shore, regretfully, we actually see literally the impact of change in the oceanography. With increased temperature, the layers of the ocean change quite considerably, and the weather patterns generating currents are also changing. And we see that actually in 2 fjords within 100 miles from me right now. They are a famously bothersome geography in Norway. We have something called threshold fjords. They are maybe like 1,200 to up to 400 meters deep. And then you have this threshold rising up from seafloor, perhaps up to 60 meters or something. So you have a huge pool or basin on the inside. This basin is traditionally refreshed with heavy, cold, oxygen-rich water when we have our famous or infamous western storms during winter. We don't see those storms anymore. So the water in these basins is stagnating. And it sort of blindsided us in this case here, because a couple of fish farms had to move. They actually withdrew their license to operate within those fjords. And one of these fish farms is the Marine Research Institute Test and Research Facility. So everybody were blindsided. What we found is that the bottom water is always oxygen-free in Norway due to these deep pools. But now that oxygen-free layer is up to 150, 200 meters thick. And it's starting to be very bothersome for the ecology, I'm sorry. And I never thought I would say that, but we desperately miss those thundering heavy western storms. And we simply don't see them.
Is there anything that technology can do to help mitigate or adapt to or forecast, or is it just, it's happening? This is what we're doing.
It is happening. So this is just a question of, this is a forest fire and how fast can you run? So our way of running would be removing all fish farming, so not to add more organic material into what Mother Nature is already pouring into these fjords. Number 2 is closing the fish farms. So in a lot of situations, especially when you're in fjord or in these basins, closing your fish farm completely or almost completely is the way to go forward in these systems. You don't want to be adding nutrition into a system that's always is blinking red on all lights. And companies like Lerøy, one of our members of the cluster, they're actually moving to gather all the feces and what feed pellets there are. So they're gathering those up, returning them into a tank boat. That tank boat takes it to a processing plant, and they create value out of that rather dodgy material, fecal materials and feed pellets. They turn it into biogas or electricity, heat, or whatever you need.
So it's more important than ever to be really sensitive about those
Absolutely
organic inputs.
Yeah.
That's
and
so helpful. I know
it's so important. This is our fjord. If we kill it, we are dead.
Yeah, this is our world.
Yeah, it is.
So agree. Thank you. I know we're running short on time, but I wanted to run to Roxanne, and I didn't know, Gabrielle, I couldn't tell if you were noting, but Roxanne, go ahead. The climate change question.
Sure, just really quickly. I mean, in a very complementary way, I think we are more in that manufacturing space. So looking at technology for reducing the impact of our manufacturing facilities. So we've installed solar panels in many of our Thailand-based facilities and looking to do that more and more. Obviously, a lot of kind of wastewater treatment types of technologies are really needed, and that's not necessarily climate oriented, but always pollution oriented solutions. And so that's a whole area of focus that we look at for our factories. And then I think one of the more out there ideas that we've been exploring is a concept of carbon neutral products, and how do you verify where components of the operation are reducing or at least offsetting their carbon. How can you document that and then put forward that as part of a product claim? So
Thanks. That's really interesting. Gabrielle, and then Jason, you want to close us out?
Well, as I said, well, technology can do little to avoid climate change, yeah, but in order to mitigate the effects, yeah, for instance, one of the things that we are marketing is a data service where every day we take data from NOAA and from the European Space Agency and all these parameters that are relevant for the fishermen, yeah, like chlorophyll patterns in the ocean, and temperature profiles in the water column and currents and all those things. And we are trying, of course, with a layer of predictive analytics, trying to predict what are the areas of the ocean with the biggest likelihood of success or not. Yeah, and of course, when you take historic data of the last years, you see exactly what my colleagues were saying. Yeah, there are changing patterns in the ocean. There are changing patterns in terms of currents that were there and they're not there anymore, and all those things. Yeah, and the only thing we can do to mitigate is have better data coming from the satellites, but also from different sensors that we are placing in the ocean, yeah, and be able to adapt quicker to all those changes that are related to the climate change, yeah.
Thanks so much. That's a great point. And Jason, final word?
Yeah, I would just partially build upon what Gabrielle was saying there. You know, you see an increase in propensity of algal blooms and things like that. So companies that can give warning of those, so you can take management decisions on how you might aerate, stop feeding, whatever strategy you might use there, are important. And then with regards to climate change, you know, in Canada we have problems with super chill, and then in the summer warm water, you know, going to the threshold of where those species will happily grow. And so, you know, biotechnology can provide some solutions to that, and also genetics and breeding, as you look at the tolerance of shellfish or finfish or whatever it is to these changing environments. And I think that's going to be a really important area for the future, to as we see these kind of production areas shift northwards, generally speaking, but also we get more extreme weather patterns. And so tolerance is going to be really, really key.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. And thank you to our amazing panelists. What a fantastic discussion. That concludes our panel, and I'm going to turn it over to Don for the next step. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks so much, Emily. Thank you for moderating that, Emily. That was just fantastic. That is an incredible panel, and there's so much knowledge there that we could go on all day and listen to these folks all day. And my only regret is we don't have more time to explore these things. But huge thank you to you. Huge thank you to our panelists. I want to give a special shout out to Jason Cleaversmith, who every time I need something in this space for this project, he steps up. He's like the Jamie Smith of the project. The two of them are just so phenomenal and step up to help us out every step of the way, and are great ambassadors for this sector. So thanks everybody, and a special thanks to Jason as well. I just want to thank Natasha Legay, Katie Leard, Shelley Hession, and Eric Siegel, who step up and work on the project and make this happen. So folks,